used to the game.
All right, we're going to try to get right to it because we expect the Kevin O'Connell presser to begin in a matter of seconds, unless, Guardsy, you tell me it already has. Bumper to Bumper is the name of the program. My name's Dan Barreiro. I host the show Guardsy produces, and it's a day after a Vikings game, which is rare for a Friday, but we will cover it largely from start to finish. Sean Salisbury is going to be with us today to get his reaction. We expect Ben Gessling. We expect Lavelle E. Neal III. We know we have lots of Vikings talking points as well. And I know this game's been talked to death, but off the top, I'm assuming we'll get some insight into the most important follow-up to the game itself. The Christian Darrisaw is indeed, we believe, out for the season. And we assume that the head coach will give us some details confirming that story. Hard to find left tackles on the market before the trade deadline, is what I've been told, Guardsy.
Seems unlikely.
Seems unlikely. Could you find somebody who might give you a chip chair and a chance? I don't know. That's one of the topics we will discuss with Sean Salisbury. We'll stay with the presser for a while, maybe not forever, because it's one of those, what do they call them in the business? It's virtual. It's a virtual presser. So
I'm hoping that it's going to work here when it starts.
Yeah, we're going to give it the best shot because we want to hear what he has to say, especially about Darrisaw, but probably don't want to stay with it because the logistics are tougher, where they go, hey, Seifert, you hit the mute button.
You're on mute, Kevin.
We got to take you off mute because we couldn't hear your question. That doesn't all make for very good radio. So the objective is to stay with it for a while. But plenty of time to chat with our guests, plenty of time to hear from you via the Bradshaw and Bryant KFAN text line at 64686. Selfishly, I'm reminded now that I got a 2-hour show the next 2 Sundays.
You do.
Because the Vikings have already played this week, and then next week we've been flexed. I wonder if there's second thoughts about that flexing after our second consecutive loss.
Right.
It's the Colts game, correct?
It is.
Yeah. So let me know if we expect to start somewhat on time as I tap dance a little bit. Guardsy's put together some very good talking points that I believe will help break down a number of fairly important subjects related to what took place last night. Of course, last night there were, 3 teams going. Your red-hot Minnesota Wild did it again. They finally fell behind during a game, but they remained, what's the word for it? Steadfast, calm, cool, collected. End up winning it 4-2. Kaprizov with a couple of more goals, including, I think, an empty netter. And then your Minnesota Timberwolves late after what looked to me to be like,
choppy waters.
Buzzsaw in Sacramento. They're going to light the beam. But then the thing changed in the third quarter in a number of significant ways. I'd like to think we rediscovered a little bit of our defensive mojo late in the third after what I saw at least, was a pretty putrid first half defensive performance. And, first half also was sort of, you could say, the coming out party for Julius Randle. And then down the stretch, of course, Ant was outstanding. So I can barely see it. Can we go?
Let's go to Kevin O'Connell
right now.
Recording in progress.
Thank you.
I want to first start out and update everybody on Christian Darrisaw. Was holding out hope last night that maybe the imaging would reveal a less significant injury, but unfortunately that is not the case. He did sustain a significant knee injury to his left knee, and it will require season-ending surgery. He will go on injured reserve today, and we'll determine the best course of action in regards to the procedure that will repair the injury. And I know CD will be right back, where he was this year, which is one of the best left tackles in football, playing at a really high level. I love everything about the progression of his career up until this moment, and he's got great folks around him, both teammates and our medical staff. that will spearhead an effort to get CD back with us as soon as possible. But for right now, I'm just really thinking about Christian. He's really developed into one of our core leaders. Clearly one of our, offensive pillars that we have leaned on a lot, and it's going to be a significant loss. But we all got to do a little bit more. It starts with me and the other 10 guys that will be in the huddle with the mindset of not only the man who steps into that role, but also all 11 really picking each other up. And we've got some really talented players on our offense, and we'll continue to progress and get better throughout the season. We'll coach this group up, and that's how we'll handle that. With that roster spot, TJ Hawkinson has been added to the 53-man roster, and he'll be ready to go against Indianapolis. Looking forward to get TJ back in our offense. Will be a significant boost for us, just as a whole, very challenging game yesterday and really tough 4 or 5 day stretch here for our organization. And this is the adversity that you build all the things you do to be able to respond in these moments, and that's what we'll do. Coaching staff, players, everybody will come together, and we'll make sure we have a really great week of preparation next week. And very fortunate to be coming back to US Bank Stadium, taking on a good Colts team. Sunday night football, and we'll have to have a great week of preparation and maximize this little extra time here to get refreshed, recharged, and make sure we're ready to go.
We'll start with Andrew and then go to Kevin and Dave.
Hey, Kevin, just first, how is Christian doing? How have you seen him handle this? And then secondly, is there anything else you can share just about what specifically this injury is?
Yeah, Christian, he's in good spirits. He's a mentally and physically tough guy. I have no doubts he's going to attack this, starting today. And he's still going to be a significant player in regards to his leadership and his presence within our building and around our team for sure. And he knows that. And like I said, I think he's got the mindset. Once this thing's fixed surgically and he can start attacking something on a daily basis, I know he'll do that. As far as the specific injury, yes, it's an ACL, MCL, injury that will require surgery to repair.
Yeah, Kevin, obviously last night David Quisenberry took over for Christian. Is that where you look to in the near and long-term future? Is there still some discussion and could there be more than one change to address this? And just where are you at on that process?
Yeah, literally those conversations are going on as we speak. I thought Quest, came in and really after that first drive, where there was some bull rush or different types of rush that maybe he was susceptible to early. I thought he settled in and did some things to help us. But yeah, we're, when you talk about that mentality of, trying to get the best 5 guys in there, and not only those 5 options, but then what's the rest of the depth look like? I do feel like this is where, where your O-line depth that we felt good about throughout training camp and then leading into the season gives you possibilities, and we'll continue to have that dialogue within our coaching staff, and we'll figure out what the best plan of attack is moving forward. And I do think there's multiple options on the table with that, Kev, and that's what we've got to figure out.
Kevin, just wondering where Walter Rouse is in his development. I know he hasn't had a chance to play, but what have you seen?
Yeah, I thought, Walter had some real flashes, especially just the power he played with in the preseason. He's a big, strong guy. He's very smart. He's, on a great trajectory as far as his development goes. And, absolutely will be, somebody that I know we feel very strongly about the future. But he's got to be in the conversation, among other things. I think guys to really look at what that group looks like here. Not only the 5 that we'll go with, but what that game day feel looks like with the eight guys we can have up.
We'll go Matthew, Dane, and Ben.
Hey, Kevin. Last night, a lot of the players in the locker room were talking about just how the Rams had done similar things offensively as Detroit did. I'm curious about the approach during this mini bye to kind of taking a look at these last 2 games defensively and how they were able to both do some similar things to get, big chunk gains.
Yeah, I think that's, I think that'll be a big part of it is kind of seeing, where the similarities were and maybe how we were attacked and whether it was maybe it was a execution thing of, an individual player here and there on some of these plays. Maybe it was a, good scheme versus what schemes we had called defensively. I know Flo and his staff will take a look at every layer of that and ultimately, put together a great plan moving forward, how to limit some of those things from happening for sure. I think just overall, when some of those drive extending penalties were critical, especially in the first half. And then, I think when you're playing Matthew Stafford and Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, you give those guys and Robinson for that matter, you give those guys more ops by not getting off the field. There's going to be more ops for them to potentially continue to try to generate those explosives. So it's an all 11 thing. It's something that we'll definitely take a long look at here over this extra time that we have, and 100% confidence in our players and absolutely in Flo and his staff to really dissect it all and come up with the best plan of action moving forward, Matt.
Hey, Kevin. Saw JJ McCarthy traveled yesterday. What was the benefit of having him, and what do you think he kind of gained from getting?
All right, we're going to fade out now. The JJ question there's nothing wrong with it, but not really pressing at this particular moment. We're playing the opening sections of the press conference involving the Vikings head coach, Kevin O'Connell, and he indeed confirms what had been reported earlier today that Darrisaw, the outstanding left tackle, sort of become very quickly in year 4 a fixture on this Vikings club, is out for the season, suffering both an ACL and MCL injury that will indeed require repair. They certainly seem to be opening the door to, we might have a couple ideas up our sleeve. The problem is you're not going to get greatness at that position. Might you get somebody that you feel gives you a little bit more flexibility than Quisenberry, who was put in there, because somebody had to play the position? The trade deadline is yet to come. So we'll probably explore all of those avenues before this program is done. But first,
the Fan and 2 men and a junk truck want to give you a shot to put $1,000 in your hand with our national cash contest. The keyword, first one for Friday, is bank. Go to KFAN.com and enter the keyword bank. Don't forget, I should say, Sean Salisbury will join us at the bottom of this hour. Talking points yet to come, so much more. Plenty of Vikings talking points that I think will help us introduce exactly what took place last night, did take place last night. 30-20 was the final score. Vikings now have a 2-game losing streak with the long, almost mini bye, preparing to host on Sunday Night Football a week from this Sunday the not all that good, although not that bad a record, Indianapolis Colts. 2 things I want to get into before we prepare for Salisbury at the bottom of this hour. Ben Gessling, Lavelle yet to come as well. Drives given up by the Flonami the last 2 weeks. 69 yards, 83, 72, 70, 44. That was the field goal drive that led the Lions' game-winning field goal. 70, 70, 70,
and 70.
We know it's not good baseball.
That's last night. My point being, because we've been so good about, frankly, not giving up the ball that much, we didn't give it up at all last night. And wasn't the stat that KOC never lost in a game in which we didn't give up?
If we won the turnover margin, yeah.
Didn't do us much good last night. The week before, I think it was 1-1 in the turnover battle, and it didn't mean that much either. That's not tolerable for any defense, let alone one that had established, it appeared, such a sterling reputation through the early part of the season. So if we buy the original premise that it was the perfect meld of scheme and personnel that was leaving other teams, including some legitimate quarterbacks, off balance, not exactly knowing how to read, both for the QB and the QB's receivers, what the Vikings were doing, it's being read just fine right now. And there's not any question the Rams stole some of the Detroit Lions material, quick throws, extra protection, making it a little bit tough even when we send people for anything good to happen. So there's a pecking order of issues that will be addressed, I'm sure, but I don't think the offense is perfect by any means. There are legitimate questions to ask there. This past week, after a brilliant start, but then what are we left with? We're settling for field goals. We're actually, in one case, taking such a bad sack that we can no longer even consider a field goal. But defense has to be at the top of the list, because if you also throw in the second half of the Green Bay game, we gave up drives of 89 and 96 yards in that game as well. So that's, to me, where it's got to start. And believe me, you love Blake Cashman. I love Cashman. Word on the street is he's an extension of the coordinator on the field, that he's been around, and he's got the blue. Is it the blue dot or the green dot?
I think it's green.
Green dot, and nobody handles the green dot like he does. I'm not dismissing that or diminishing it. But come on, boys and girls. We're not talking about Fred Warner here. We're not talking about Ray Nitschke. I don't think we're talking about Dick Butkus. Maybe I'll have to apologize for that later, as being the only explanation for all of the unraveling that's taken place on the field. That's weak. I mean, the Lions had, I believe, going into, in the Vikings game, 4 starters out. They obviously lost their best defensive player. Injuries happen. And I think it's too easy to basically say, well, you got to get Cashman back and everything's going to change. Maybe it will, although I think if it's going to change, it's more likely it's going to change because we're playing crappier offenses and crappier quarterbacks, or quarterbacks who aren't up to what the last two did. Goff was brilliant a week ago, and I think, to me, this was as good as Stafford has looked for me in a long time. He was again largely accurate. He had one bad pick.
Yep.
But other than that, he was decisive. He was aggressive. And guess what?
He was bouncy.
He was
springy,
he was
twitchy.
elusive, and they kept going for touchdowns, right? They weren't settling for field goals. They weren't playing this game. Hell, they went for it on fourth down in a situation where you could argue the conservative play would be to punt. And that, to me, certainly enters into it. Good quarterback play helps to handle whatever this Flonami approach has tended to be. But they're going to have to take a long, hard look at themselves, because those are, like I said, there's no cheapies in there. When the average drive, all 4 touchdown drives started after touchbacks. For the Rams, 70, 70, 70, and 70. And even longer drives for Detroit, that can't be sustained. That's not tenable. And my concern is the obvious. The schedule's going to get more favorable. You're playing more beatable teams, probably with quarterbacks who can't exploit the same way. But what's the big picture? We've been teased enough and aroused enough to say, hey, we might be in playoff contention. And you're thinking to yourself, well, are we going to be good enough, though, to do anything in the playoffs? Because there you are likely to play better teams again with better quarterbacks again. So you got to fix this beyond just that we're going to play some easier teams, so that might take the pressure off. If your long-term goal for this season is we actually want to try to think we might, in a weird year in the NFC, be able to make a run. How did Sean Salisbury process the game? We know how he processed the missed call at the end of the game. We'll get to that and much more with Shawnee. Bradshaw and Brian KFAN text line is wide open, 64686.
Tune into Wild Wednesday every week. It's your chance to win tickets to see your Minnesota Wild, who won last night. In an upcoming game, Wild Wednesdays are presented by Jim Beam, a crowd pleaser since 1795.
I wonder if our next guest occasionally, because he hosts a daily, very popular, controversial radio show out of Houston, if he runs into the same problem that I am dealing with again today, I want to read a text as we say hi to Sean Salisbury via the Bradshaw that's the Bradshaw and Brian KFAN text line, the Connecticut Water Systems hotline that came in just a while ago, and it reads as follows. Dan, so you're saying the Vikings should just be able to seamlessly move on after losing one of the best left tackles in the league? Yeah, okay. I don't recall, Guardsy, you can be the witness, you were here. When did I suggest that it would be easy to move on?
I don't recall that.
From one of the best left tackles in the league. Sean, I was spending a little bit more time early on the defense because I laid out the number. Last 2 weeks, these are the yardage totals for drives they've given up. You may know this. 69 yards, 83, 72, 70, 70, 70, 70, and 70. And that's a problem, right? I mean, that tells us either you got really good quarterback play who can figure out what to do against the B-Flow defense, or you got some adjustments. They've caught up with it, and you're going to have to find some other way to go about it. Let's stay with the defense first. What struck you about what you saw regarding how well or how effective for the second straight week an opposing team with a good quarterback was able to solve this defense?
Dan, good to be with you. Yes, and real quick, I do. You get messages all the time, and I'll have to tell them sometimes. And I love our listeners and fans, and I know you love yours too. I do. Sometimes you could say something, and I could say, well, C.J. Stroud is a really good player, and they gotta if they don't continue to attack vertically, they're not going to make the playoffs. I can't believe you don't think they're a playoff team.
Yes.
They're not going to the Super Bowl? What do you mean? You're a hater now?
Yeah, hater.
You're a hater? What are you talking about? You don't know anything.
Right.
Well, you're right. I don't know anything. And
neither do I.
My favorite, I don't have a clue, but my favorite is when the guy who tells me that is, what do you do? What are you talking about, Sean? You're a backup.
Yes.
I know. And then I ask him, well, let me see your tape from 1984. So I don't know, but I just smile. But it cracks me up. Putting words in your mouth is good. What do you mean they suck? I really never said they suck. They're pretty good actually, but it's one little comment. But it makes me laugh a little bit.
It keeps you humble.
It does.
Sure.
Well, that life has a way of certain callers are doing that.
No question.
I can humble them once in a while too.
I'm sure you can.
Defensively, what it tells me is sustained drives are like physical. Sustained drives for offense are like, we've talked about defense in the past on like being physical and controlling the front seven. In a boxing match, Dan, when somebody is, when you're boxing and a guy backs away from a right cross and then, then hits you with the straight right and kind of flailing away, but lands it and knocks you out.
Yeah.
And you've been dominant and you've been having, you're going pretty good, but he didn't body blow you. It was one of those, he just got that punch in, you've blocked and knocked you down to the canvas and stunned you and won the fight. Okay. It's the same, but the fight that the guy you can get up from that and say, I want a rematch. You can. You say, well, wait a minute, man. He just landed that lucky punch, or I missed. Didn't get my hands up. With body blows, what happens to a boxer? When you keep taking body blows, the guy's wearing you out by hitting you in the rib cage and the gut, and then boom, hits you in the face and rib. At the end of that fight, it's kind of like they've taken a little bit of your soul. It's like, damn,
good point.
They when somebody wears you out physically, I guess is my point, as opposed to finesse. You know what you are. It's like, whoo, that was different. It hit different. When they wear you out with finesse, they hit a bomb that a guy makes a catch. That's like, oh, come on, man. I can't believe he hit that throw or made that catch. But when they drive 70 and 70 and 80 and 68 and 80, I'm huge on that. The numbers you mentioned, I talk about it all the time. I said, teams that sustain drives are the guy who beats you in the rib cage, that fight that wears you out and starts to take part of your soul. And that's what happened. And we talked, Dan, about the Minnesota defense at the beginning of this year about how they deal with that particular offense. They've done, in San Francisco.
Yeah, that's right.
And that group of offense, the way those guys, same verbiage, the way they go about it, that he was ahead of the curve, that he was ahead of them, and they needed to adjust to him because he's been doing it. He did it here to he did it. Kevin's team and Brian did it to San Francisco, and they did it to Houston, and they ran into another one last night, guys who run the same stuff. Well, Brian was ahead of the curve in that. Well, then now there's a little catch-up going on. And the game where they catch up, the game is always this. You hit, they start to adjust, they adjust, you're on the sidelines, then you got to adapt and adjust. That's the way it is. So they've won a couple battles now, but sustained drives is a problem. If you came on here and said, Sean, they hit a double move go, they hit a big post over the top where the safety stumbled, and then they had one 58-yard drive for a touchdown. And all three were touchdowns. I'd come back and say, not a problem. You just got to make sure you're in the right position. So big deal. Now you come back and say 385-yard drives, 370-yard drives where they ran it through it, and punched it into the end zone, and it was 12 plays, 14 plays. That's more of a problem than the big play. The big play is if the guy's out of position, I'll sit his ass down.
Right.
That's 11 guys getting moved. So they've adjusted now, and they had no sacks, and Stafford stepped out of a pressure. So it's a little different now. The teams are saying, okay, here's where Brian and this defense's strengths are, and here's how they're utilizing them against us. So how do we adjust? Now, you got to have and Stafford played well, and they got the two receivers back. So to me, I would much rather, Dan, you and I are coaching a team. You come to me and say, they hit two big plays. We're okay.
Yeah,
As opposed to, Sean, they ran 70 plays. 4 of those drives ended in touchdowns, and they pushed down to the red zone, and they ran it and threw it. It was just a heavyweight fight where they hit me in the ribcage. I couldn't take the body blows. I believe that's happened a little more than the Vikings when they were undefeated.
They looked, and what happens to the boxer who keeps getting hit in the belly? It's obviously your gloves, you tire, your gloves drop.
Right. Legs get wobbly, and then you're pushed around.
And then you're even more susceptible to the occasional big shot, and because they have given up a couple of plays, not like 80 or 70-yard plays, but they've given up some 35ers and some 40s. And it looked to me like what basically the Rams said is, all right, we're going to tend to throw pretty fast. We're going to get the ball out of the hand quickly. We're going to use receivers sometimes in motion, either to help Max protect or to help block if it's going to be a kind of a play on the edges. And it's a very smart scheme that was well executed. And as you mentioned, we didn't know, when the week started that the Rams would have either of their big time receivers back. Turns out they had them both, and at various times they were very effective, especially one of them, very effective in kind of doing, like you say, the body blows, the little punches.
Yes.
10 yards here, 12 yards there, 15 yards here and there.
You know what, Dan, we all the time talk about, man, what are we doing? Explosive big plays on offense, or how we're making big plays. We don't a lot of times talk, we will always discuss that. The mistakes you don't make, right? We talk about good things that happen, but sometimes winning a game is where the team that wins didn't make that big mistake, meaning let's say they drop back and take a big 7-step drop, right? And Stafford's holding the ball. Now aren't you playing into what good pressure defenses do?
Mm-hmm.
And you hit it perfect. Not only do they motion to max protect or to chip on the way out on a late delay or to wonder if it's zone or man and who it is, and to find out where the mismatch are. You motion for people. I know most people probably know this, but when we motion, a lot of times we use in multiple formations, and I do a lot of motion, which I don't understand at any level why they don't do it more, is for the majority of times, NFL's adjusting a little bit. When you run in motion and guy runs with you, immediately it's telling you man. When you run in motion and the guy stays, now the quarter, it's zone. And who better to beat zone than Puka and Cooper Kupp.
Yeah,
and you got
true.
two guys in, and those body blows that it's like a 7-yard. And you saw the great play where the rookie back Corum steps up on an inside A-gap blitz, going to the red zone, thumps the guy, gets him out of the way, and this is a rookie. Boom, and Stafford hits that slant in behind. If he throws it late, that ball is knocked down or picked onto the right slot area, but he threw it to the outside receiver. Boom, another play. They did not allow them to play into their strength. And then the one time he held it a little while, he sidestepped, dipped under, and you're not going to be, no matter who you are, you can't cover guys for 5 seconds. Eventually, they're going to make a play if you don't sack. And when you sell out and miss or don't get the tackle, a veteran like Stratford's going to find a place to throw it, and he still can rip it. So I am a much bigger, even on offense on my side. Who doesn't want Jefferson making big plays or in any team? But look at teams over the course of time. And there are differences. But the way the Kansas City Chiefs are winning, they're wearing you out and playing defense right now. And they're not really that good offensively without Mahomes. They aren't. But you think over the old Steelers, and I can go through different decades, and I know teams we were on in Minnesota. Think about the Washington game. When the game started, we came out smoking, and then I didn't play well. We didn't play well offensively. They were bigger than we were. They just were. We were so quick offensively and defensively. But if I'm not making throws and or doing the right thing, and our offense is getting off the field too quick, and they come out with Ernest Biner, and they're running that, they're running that gut and outside play that we ran when Jack Burns came to us. And what did they eventually do? Aside from poor quarterback play by me, and our offense not sustaining 4 quarters, they just beat us into submission. And by the end of that game, you're like, man, well, that heavyweight knew it. And then when they hit right at the face, but it was the body blows, and they steal your soul, man. I'm just telling you. And both quarterbacks play. It was a hell of a football game. And I know we're going to get to the big, the stuff in the room with the elephant in the room, but a hell of a football game that shouldn't have been marred by what we're about to talk about. But both quarterbacks played well. And in games like that, guess what usually wins out? How you pick up that extra blitz, you run for a couple extra yards to be able to hit those long, sustained drives. And what does it also do? It limits your possessions on the other side. Sounds elementary, but it's such a fact. And even defensively, you'll start to, I'm not saying they did argue among yourselves, or it's like when a guy keeps beating you down with those short passes and shallow crossers and a run off, inside zone, outside zone. And by the time you get there, and you're right, then eventually you get frustrated. So you jump something, you get after it, and boom, somebody hits you with a bigger play because your legs are tired and your body's beat down. So I thought the Los Angeles Rams had a beautiful approach to the game last night. Yeah. And the sad thing about it, we're not talking enough nationally about a good football game on a Thursday night, which are hard to come by at times. We're talking about two guys who missed calls that a seventh grader with no vision glasses can't miss. And I know how hard it is to officiate, watching it. I mean, talking to people, I want no part of it. But they're the experts. Just like I wouldn't think they want part of standing in the pocket and getting face masks themselves as an official. And it had nothing to do with the Vikings or the Rams. Right. It had to do with you just simply cannot miss those calls. And why every play is not reviewable, because they're all judgment calls, is the dumbest thing we do. We change rules all the time in sports to create gimmicks, like the kickoff or like putting a guy on second in extra innings, in regular season in baseball. But I'll be damned if we can't get it right, where it could possibly have been a different game, and that guy's yanking his head 170 degrees, and both guys, we couldn't see it. Well, from my vantage point, there is cameras in the stadium. Not only could you see it, you can't miss it.
Yeah.
And that's the frustrating part of me, because, again, you're going to get an apology, probably, from the NFL, but it ain't going to help a victory.
No, and, look, it was going to be a very difficult challenge. I think pretty unlikely that the Vikings were going to carry it out, but that's not the point. The point is you're not supposed to take away whatever chance they had on that last drive, because as it turns out, because of you could say an execution issue where receiver, I think it was Kupp, wasn't it, ends up going out of bounds. Yes. Adding an extra, basically giving the Vikings an extra minute to at least dream about doing it. That's what you can't do. I guess I was surprised. I know, as I understand the rule now, even though in this case it's a scoring play, so to speak, right? It is not reviewable. My assumption, I would think again, of all the plays that are not reviewable now that get into judgment, I would argue that play, that sort of play, grabbing the mask, grabbing the helmet, whatever, should be the easiest to grandfather in when it comes to reviews, right? Because it's right. Easy, exactly. Yeah.
Right. On a replay.
Yes.
And I when people and here goes again when people when you criticize the official on that call, all of a sudden, a referee will come in. It's a high score. Oh, you guys do. You know how hard the job is. You hate refs, and you couldn't do it. You're damn right I couldn't do it, and that's why I don't want it. But they are the experts, right? And that's why they get paid to do it, and pretty damn good money. Dan, you are so spot on with this part. And I feel like it's been 30 years since I've been saying, please, can we have somebody come in like everybody else and be accountable and address the media to give us what you saw live, so I don't have to hear about it the next day. Right. I really would like that set up there. Yes. We make NBA players go to All-Star game media days. So why can't a guy address it? We got enough safety. No media guy's going to jump over the thing and beat him up.
Maybe Sid might if he had the chance. He tried a few times.
There you go. But do that. But the other part is, I think it was Belichick who suggested it, and whoever did, it's spot on. It doesn't mean you're giving any more red flags to the coaches. It just means why isn't every player viewable? Another simple thing. You know how guys seem to line up or their heads off sides in the neutral zone?
Yes.
Can't review it. But imagine it's 3rd and 5 or 4th and 5, and the team was on their last play, and you're the defense that's played your heart out, or vice versa, the offense that's played your heart out, and it's 4th and 5, and you're trying to grind and win. And guy's offsides because his helmet's 6 inches, and you can see it. He gets there and goes and gets a sack, ball game over. And you're saying, wait a second, that would have been a first down. We get 3 more down, blah, blah, 4 more downs. And we can see it clearly on the side view, but you can't review it. I'm talking about, they're all judgment calls. Now, people say it'll bog down the game. No, it won't. You're not getting any extra red flags. We're just looking at stuff that we do with a guy goes out of bounds, but a guy grabs a face mask in the end zone.
Yeah, that should be.
What if the score would have been 20? What if the score would have been 28-26
sure.
or 26 all or 28 all, and it ended like that? And who's to know? That receiver you guys got? I've seen him make some pretty big plays. We saw earlier in the year a 90-yard over-the-top play that scored for a touchdown. So who knows? But I just don't. And it isn't that hard. If you would have reviewed a play, if you could review a play, like yes, and 2-point defensive scoring plays aren't reviewable, which it's still points, and I have zero idea why it's not considered a scoring play. That's what I'm saying. Where's the uniformity to this? So you go up and you look at it, Dan. You're right. If they took one, I'm talking about in 8 seconds, when you look at the play, that would have been reviewed and it would have been reversed. And who the hell knows what would happen? Because you'd have got 15 yards. They'd have moved it out.
You're on the 18-yard line.
Hey, listen, and there's still a minute plus to go.
Right.
And so I see teams all the time. Boom, 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 boom. Guy hits a 20-yard skinny post for a touchdown, and now who knows? But damn, at least give me a chance to swing, right? At least give me a swing in it. So I don't understand. I know the refs have a hard job, but that wasn't. I could see if a big old lineman was in his view. Both guys had views staring right into clear picture to the quarterback. So I'm thinking, what are you looking at if that's not what you're looking at? I was always thought, especially dropping back in the end zone, you're looking for holding, and the guys are being pushed back towards the quarterback. Your peripheral vision alone has to see the head snapping back, and you're the closest guy to the action. I just don't understand. I know he may have not seen it, but my question is why? And how do you miss it? What are you looking at if you're back there? Two guys, that just is baffling to me.
Not only where are you, I always thought part of the job of any official in that situation is moving. If he sees, all right, I might be obstructed here, so my job is to fade in one direction or the other. That's the other thing that made absolutely no sense to me.
Right
on that play.
That'll be real quick.
Yeah,
I swear it's like you and I talked before this, and we never do.
That's the beauty of it.
I said today, is there a rule that tells me the official has to stand where he started?
Statute. Yes,
or is
exactly.
he not allowed? Like if I drop back to throw and there's a linebacker in the middle between me and my curl route, I am allowed to sidestep to try and create vision.
That's the job.
The whole explanation is absolutely baffling. And you're exactly right. When they go to their off season, they change rules to change them. Please let this be one of them. Please.
Sean Salisbury is with us day after Vikings lose their second in a row last night to the Rams. I want to quickly ask you about the age-old question of scripted plays, and because a stat's going around a lot today that is getting people's attention. It lists the Vikings rank two sections. It's broken down plays 1 through 15 and then plays 15 plus, I assume, meaning basically the rest of the game.
Right.
So in the scripted plays 1 through 15, generally believe that most of those are scripted. Vikings in like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 categories, including points scored, passing yards, yards per play. Vikings are first, 8th, and 2nd. In those same categories and classifications, plays 15 plus, they are 23rd, 21st, 26th, 27th, and 29th. Now, there's a part of me that says, well, part of this is they've gotten off to really good starts, and that explains it. But
sure,
help us understand, is there a direct connection, you think, that when you get past the scripted plays, that's when your coaches do have to be very good and very creative? Why this contrast between the scripted part, and does it say that this team has some adjusting to do to figure out how to react to a given situation post the script period?
Yeah, that's a hell of a question, and they don't think much about that. Now that you mentioned it, the first thing that comes to mind is like, please let the numbers just say we start fast and the game changes and they make adjustments and they go. And when, as you're staring at and thinking about it, well, first off, when you're scripting 15 plays and we know you're studying it and going, it's like anything. If somebody gave you the answers to the test for an essay in the first 15 questions, you'd be pretty adept, at least, because you'd feel comfortable, because it's not like play 27. I don't know what's coming. You know what's coming for the most part, right? Offensively, I'm talking about, with your guys knowing how to execute it and have already gone in their mind for 24 hours. Here's what we're doing. Here's what we're doing. That's a possibility. The other side is that, the adjustment, and you can't script 65. I guess you could, but the way the game, what if you're down by 30?
Yeah, right.
And the reason we script plays is, you go through and you're watching all their tendencies on 1st and 2nd and 6 and 1st and 10. And if I'm scripting plays, in which Brian Billick, we've done it, and people do it quite often to get that comfort and rhythm. And I also think it's for the coach and the play caller. I don't think it's just for the players. I think it gives the play caller a chance to study and study and study. What if I see this? What ifs, if they give me this coverage, they give me, and you're ready. Now it becomes a spontaneous. Now you got to deal on the fly, quick adjustments, make it happen post 15. So when you're scripting them, I would always, if I was scripting or we had them, and I've scripted them in games at a lesser level when I'm coaching an All-American game as a coordinator for Houston Nutt for the last 2 years, is you script them how you want to go, but you script them against man, zone. Are these plays good regardless? Are they call it and run it? Where it'll execute against any defense, but you still got to execute. So I think a lot of it has to do with comfortability. I think a lot of it has to do with you've prepared for it and you've worked on it all week, and now there's that unknown. And I also think that, and what we do with those first 15 plays, Brian Billick was really good at giving you 15 different formations with 3 or 4 of the same plays in those first, like 8 different formations on the first 10 plays. But 3 of those plays might have been the same, might have been outside stretch play one way, then we motion and block the backside and stretch play the other way, but it looked different to the defense. So I wish I had a scientific answer for that. The simple fact that I'd be more prepared for a test when I know what I'm doing as opposed to going in cold turkey. Yeah. And that happens. But, getting into the rhythm of the game, because defenses are trying to feel you out. And I think it's just a fact that they're confident in executing it. But when people say, why don't you do it the whole game? I guess you could, but there's so much that goes on in a game. The first 15 you can kind of anticipate. And you also are going to look at, it's the metrics of it, like analytics of what do they do in the first, what does Brian do on defense first 15 plays? What do the Rams like to do? And that's exactly why you do it. And you hope you don't have to crap can your game plan 5 plays in, but scripting is comfortable and gets you locked in as a player. But it also tells you post 15, they're having a little more difficulty executing, whether it's the defense or them, stuff that's a little more spontaneous and on the fly.
The worst news, of course, from an injury standpoint to come out of this game is that the head coach confirmed at the start of the show that Christian Darrisaw is out for the season, will need to go undergo surgery, ACL and MCL tears involved. There's really no way to recover from losing a left tackle this good, right? I mean, the trade deadline's still there. Maybe you'll tell me there are a couple of linemen that aren't as good as him, but that you might be able to grab. I don't know. How does the team, leaving aside all the other issues, How does the team deal with the loss of their best offensive lineman?
Aside from going and getting a quarterback, because we usually don't trade quarterbacks that are starters and good big-time players, I can go get a receiver who may not have fit in somewhere and came here. And we get him. He's our third guy, and we can fit him in because the quarterback puts it on him. He catches and he assists him. That position you're talking about with Darisaw is tough to get, because if it was that easy, we'd be physical in every game, and I could go get anybody off the scrap heap. There'll be some available, nothing like him. So, Dan, and I can't believe you hate Christian Darisaw in the football, and I can't believe that you also think it's so simple to replace a guy. Do I sound like me?
Yeah, I don't know what I want.
I can't believe it's easy, Dan. I can't believe you said it was easy. No.
What was I thinking?
Right, how dare you? It's not easy. It's, hell, thinking back our teams, how are we replacing Gary Zimmerman?
Yeah,
good analogy. The midway point. Right. You're going to go out and get a guy who's got to learn your verbiage, unless he's played in for the Texans or if he's played for, and they're not giving away Tunsil or 49ers, who the verbiage is the same. Then you got to, and by that time, 2 weeks have passed, and now you're past the trade deadline. No, I don't want to say it's impossible. Now, it is truly, and it's such a elementary, and it's such the saying that we use way too often, and it's so cliche, is a next man up. Yeah, well, next man up usually isn't as good as the first man up, and that's why he's not playing. But the great thing about offensive line play, and left tackle's tough. You may have to get somebody who can swing both ways and play right or left or move somebody around, which teams do. The versatility is with five guys, Dan. Though, as you know, if three of them are working in unison and two aren't, you're screwed. If five are working in unison, give me five solid players as opposed to one great one and four that are kind of okay. Sure. I'll win more with five. So we've seen teams do it, but don't have a household name. You'd like to have all stars. So yes, this is a brutal loss. I can't think of three a defensive player, maybe losing Jefferson, losing your starting quarterback. But other than that, you got a guy who's a big time player, and you're not just going to be able to pencil somebody in and get the same. So the challenge now, get the same result, comes to Kevin and the offensive line. Okay, what do we do now to offset that? Does that mean we got to keep the back end more longer to help chip the backup? And you're just not going to go. Nobody's trading their big time. Nobody that's got a chance to go make the playoffs. And most teams don't consider themselves out of it unless they just say we're not any good and the owner wants to sell. So trying to find a left tackle at the trade deadline, don't look for teams that are still in the hunt. They're not giving that guy away. That guy's too hard to find. So maybe there's a cagey veteran. No, I don't think Andrew Whitworth is ready to come out of retirement from TV yet. Although he'd give you some minutes and some plays. But you've got to, and maybe more than one guy. But you got to find, and it's hard to do, and it's as tough a job as there is at trade deadline, finding a stud that has to block the best athlete on the defensive team on a regular basis. Not fun. And yes, even all that went on, that's the thing, because this isn't a 1 week thing. Haven't been a guy who's torn an ACL and MCL. He'll be ready to go next year, but it's going to, the rehab will kick in, and we'll see you next training camp.
One last item. We're running a little bit late, but I want to be sure I get to it because it's related. I have a bunch of texts, and I guess this has become a debate point today, which surprises me, but maybe doesn't. A lot of people are basically blaming this injury on KOC's decision to not take a knee. Now, I got to tell you, man, I wouldn't have had any problems if they had taken a knee, although I think they were at the 2 or 3, which is a tough place, I guess, maybe to take a knee. On the other hand, they know the Rams are going to get the ball in the second half. We've often seen, I think, coaches go, all right, we think they're light against the run. We're going to hand the ball off, and maybe Jones goes for 20, right? And then we're suddenly on the 23 or 25-yard line. We got timeouts. And then we say, now we think we can take a shot at least trying to get 3 points. So to me, to put this on the coach for the decision that if they hadn't run the play, if they'd just taken a knee, he wouldn't be out. I call that unfortunate, but I don't think what they did was all that unusual. What do you think?
No, and Dan, I don't listen. It's weak and wrong to blame this on Kevin O'Connell. When you play, you're exactly right. And then if it's no gain, and you say, well, we don't have it, then you take a knee, and we go in. And you've seen the Rams score points. You know it's one of those games that their quarterback's playing well defensively, that we're not getting off the field like we normally do. And in those, and usually, Dan, in those, when you're backed up, it's almost like a kneel down when you hand off sometimes, right? They're trying to push the pile. It could have happened at any point in time. And I understand, well, if we don't do it, he doesn't get hurt. Yeah, but if my aunt had stones, she'd be my uncle. Okay, I understand. And if you coached like that, now if you put Darisaw on kick coverage,
right? Something reckless.
Come on, man. Or played Jason Sehorn in a preseason game like the Giants did.
Yes.
Okay, you're returning kicks. I get it, but with this, I doubt Darisaw. Hey, KOC, it's his fault that I blew out my knee. We should have kneeled down. Well, it's like in the second half, you're dropping back to pass, and he. I blew out my knee one time. The second time, I didn't even take a hit. It put it in the ground wrong. The cleat stuck in, and it shredded my ACL at Arizona State. The point I'm making is, there's no way you go into it thinking, well, I don't want to get hurt, and Kevin doesn't want to play a shirt, so let's kneel down. You are waiting for that to see, well, maybe we'll get a burst. Maybe we'll take a shot. Yeah. And then you kneel down and end it. So, I listen, it's unfortunate that some feel that. I get their frustration and why. But injuries in this sport, from a guy, trust me, that I've been through a few, and I know guys have, it sucks, but you never know when it could have happened. And yes, it wouldn't have happened on that play had they kneeled down. But you can't live, if you carry that around, that burden around, you'll go nuts.
Yeah,
it's unfortunate, but that's not Kevin O'Connell's fault that Darisaw, because of a knee, blew out his knee. It's just not. It's an unfortunate set of circumstances.
Great conversation. It was really good to have you the day after a game. That was a great idea on your part, and we will we'll talk in a week or so.
I look forward to next Thursday, brother. Thanks,
awesome.
Dan.
Thanks, man.
Okay.
That is great stuff from our guy Sean Salisbury down Houston, Texas way. We've got Vikings talking points to get to. We have Ben Gessling to get to. We've got, we think, Lavelle E. Neal III on the mend to get to. And we've got a full show in which to do it.